Imagine being completely invisible, underestimated by literally everyone around you, but secretly, you're holding all the cards. Today, we're diving into this absolutely incredible historical account from 19th century England. It's a story that centers on a duke, a housemaid, and of all things, a library catalog as the ultimate weapon. It's such a brilliant example of how intellect and strategy can completely dismantle rigid class structures, and honestly, it offers some totally timeless lessons in recognizing your own worth.
We're just going to jump right into the thick of it. This entire saga kicks off with three key things: a totally invisible housemaid who secretly reads Latin, a genuinely cruel joke made by a high society guest, and a collision that birthed a 40-year legend. It is a literal masterclass in patience, professional boundaries, and knowing exactly when to play your hand when you're stuck in a toxic environment.
900. That's a huge number, right? Well, that is the exact number of books Alice Verity had secretly read in the Duke of Hollingbourne's library while working as an entirely overlooked housemaid. You see, she had actually been taught Latin by her late father, who was a schoolmaster. So she'd slip into the library at 6 a.m., standing quietly near the door, just devouring volumes of history and classics before the rest of the Grand Estate even woke up. She was completely off the radar until a tiny, careless mistake totally exposed her secret to the staff.
Naturally, word of this reading maid trickled upstairs to the aristocratic guests. And a visiting noblewoman, Lady Sowerby, decides this would make for some excellent sport. Her brilliant plan? Invite the reading maid to dinner. Let us see what she has to say about Herodotus. She basically wanted to parade Alice around a formal dinner like a performing dog, throwing out questions she couldn't possibly answer just so the wealthy guests could have a good laugh at her expense. But you know what the real tragedy is here? The Duke of Hollingbourne sat right at the head of his own table, heard this intensely cruel plan, and said absolutely nothing to stop it.
Meanwhile, downstairs, the housekeeper, Mrs. Doggett, is absolutely disgusted by the Duke's cowardice. In a totally brilliant act of what we'd probably call malicious compliance today, think of it like a rogue HR manager taking a stand. She decides that if Alice has to endure this humiliating dinner, she is not doing it in a patched gray servant's uniform. No way. Mrs. Doggett marches up to the attic and pulls out a heavy wine-red silk gown with gold at the hem. It belonged to the Duke's late wife, Lady Sarah, who had passed away 11 years prior. She dresses the maid in the dead Duchess's gown, basically forcing the Duke to physically confront his complete failure to protect his own staff. And Alice's response to this? It is a masterclass in unbending honesty. When she walks into that dining room, the place goes dead silent. The Duke turns completely white. He manages to ask Alice where she got the gown, totally expecting a cowering, tearful apology. But instead, Alice stands right there in front of the snickering elite and fiercely protects Mrs. Doggett. She bluntly tells him she begged not to wear it, but that the housekeeper insisted, putting her own job on the line to make a point. Alice just takes the heat head on.
Let's compare the expectations with reality here. Lady Sowerby fully expected a terrified servant who would completely bomb questions about Herodotus. But Alice utterly refuses to play their game. She bluntly announces to the whole table that she hasn't read a single word of Herodotus, because there isn't actually a copy of Herodotus in the Hollingbourne library. Instead, she casually mentions there is a copy of Thucydides with the boards falling off, filled with secret pencil notes in the margins written by a woman. In one single breath, Alice proves she is literally the only person in the room who knows exactly what is and isn't on those shelves.
The very next morning, the whole dynamic shifts from dramatic tension to a high-stakes professional negotiation. The Duke sends for Alice to apologize, and he makes this stunning confession. He admits he had secretly known she was reading his books for months. He desperately needed someone to catalog his massive library, but he just didn't have the courage to elevate a lowly housemaid to the position of a scholar. He admits he wanted her out of the servants' hall and into the library, but he didn't want to be the man who did it. Just profound cowardice, and he confesses it right to her face. So, the Duke finally offers her the monumental task of cataloging all 4,000 books. Alice accepts, but crucially, she does it out of agency, not gratitude. Her reasons are a timeless lesson in knowing your worth. First, she wanted it. Second, she knew she was absolutely the best fit alive to do it. And third, at £80 a year, which, by the way, was the exact equivalent of a male scholar's wage, she refused to let pride get in the way of securing her own financial independence. But she knew the local gossip mill would be brutal. So, to protect her reputation, she acts like a seasoned lawyer and sets some intensely firm boundaries. She demands strict conditions drawn up by an actual solicitor. She flat out refuses to spend a single night under the Duke's roof, opting to rent a room in the village instead.
She sets strict 9 to 5 working hours and insists the library door stays wide open. Most importantly, she demands a final legal document stating exactly what she was hired to do, heavily emphasizing the word catalog. She was literally bulletproofing her future.
For 3 solid years, she meticulously catalogs the collection, and this work uncovers what they call the fourth column, which is really the emotional core of her time there. It turns out the late Duchess Sarah had actually started this catalog before she died, leaving these witty, highly opinionated notes in pencil in the margins. So Alice starts adding her own notes in ink right next to them. For years, the living housemaid and the late Duchess were essentially having this profound, ongoing intellectual argument across time, deeply connected by their shared brilliance.
Naturally, over these 3 years, Alice and the Duke grow quite close. They're bonded by their mutual respect for the library. But then, the ultimate threat drops in 1831. The Duke's extended aristocratic family suddenly realizes, wait, he might actually marry a former servant, so they send a vicious blackmail letter through their solicitors, threatening to frame their working relationship as a scandalous, illicit affair. And they claim this improper connection began on the very night of that infamous dinner party.
Alice is hit with a terrifying realization. There is nothing in this world so durable as a lie that has been filed. She knows they can't just deny this blackmail letter. In the legal world, a lie resting securely in a filed document is going to outlive them all. Decades later, historians or family members would find that letter and just take it as absolute truth. Verbal denials vanish, but filed papers, those remain.
But then it clicks. She realizes she has been unknowingly building an ironclad alibi this entire time. Over the course of 3 years, she takes the catalog, all 4,081 entries, meticulously dated and initialed every single day, and demands the Duke have it formally published by a printing house in London. This was the ultimate checkmate. By publishing the catalog, Alice puts both her name and the late Duchess's name right on the title page. She basically creates an undeniable, highly public alibi. If the Duke's family ever tried to dig up that blackmail letter claiming she was just an improper connection, well, there'd be 2 published volumes sitting in every major library in England proving exactly what she was doing every single day. Rigorous, documented academic work.
4 months. That is the exact amount of time Alice intentionally waited after publication to finally marry the Duke. And this wasn't some random coincidence. She insisted on this delay. Think about it. A woman who marries a duke and then publishes a book is assumed to have only been published because of her husband's wealth. But a woman who publishes a brilliant academic catalog and then marries a duke 4 months later, she's done 2 separate things in the exact right order. That 4-month difference secured her 100 years of being taken seriously for her own mind.
Decades later, a happily married Alice finally reveals to her husband the real reason she stayed after that horrific dinner party. You see, everyone in the room that night thought the Duke's silence was horror at seeing a lowly maid wearing his dead wife's clothes. But Alice, with her profound emotional intelligence, saw right through it. She knew it wasn't horror. It was the raw, paralyzing shock of seeing that exact color of silk for the first time in 11 years. She saw his humanity before anyone else did.
So the Duke cowardly allowed a deeply cruel joke to happen just so he could offer her a job. It cost her her dignity in that moment, for sure, but it also handed her the keys to financial independence and, eventually, a dukedom on her very own terms. So I'll leave you with this. Should she have taken the job knowing his cowardice, or walked away with her pride to remain an invisible maid forever? Thanks for exploring this amazing story with me on This Explainer. Keep learning and keep questioning.